Hello and welcome everyone to Dax Electronic Repair. Today we are going to be doing a PS5 HDMI on the new Slim model. Pretty similar to the regular PS5s, but a little bit different, so here you go. Alright, new Slim model. It is slimmer. So that's why they called it that. These panels kind of just snap off. They release in a different way than the old ones, older style. You just kind of pull up from the front towards the back and it comes off. It's got two separate panels. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is go ahead and get all of our T9 or Torx 9 bolts out of here. I like to keep all of these in place, so I'm not going to remove them. You see I just have them sticking up. This just makes it easier so you don't have to separate them or identify them. You can if you want. They've actually got a couple dots by them, one or two dots denoting what they are, but I just leave it in the case and I'll show you how I do that here in a second. So I got all the fan bolts out as well. They're all T9s, and there's a little compartment there that you lift off. It's just a little sticker, and that's where the fan connection is. Go ahead and pull that out, and then you can lift the fan out. I also leave all the screws in place for the fan as well, and I just set it aside. That way everything's ready to go when you put it back together. So we've got all the T9 screws out. There's one last regular, just Phillips head for where the optional M.2 goes. Cover on that. And then now you can just lift the top off, put it aside. Everything remains in place for when you put it back together. Alright, so inside is a little bit different than the other styles. We've got two connections for the Wi-Fi antennas, and I'm going to show you here. It says RB and RW. You can see right there. RW means for the white, B is for blue. That way you know which one goes into which one when you're putting it back together. The cable lengths should also kind of tell you, but that's the little guide that's there in case you forgot or didn't know. Alright, get those cables out of the way, and like the older style, now we just remove a bunch of T9 screws on the heatsink. Same deal on this. There's a heatsink frame on this side with the circuit motherboard sandwiched in between, and they spare no expense on the number of bolts on this bad boy, just the same as the other ones. This one probably has a couple less than the original style, but it's still a lot. So that's why I got one little handy electric screwdriver. Helps out quite a bit. Now I will show you this. There is a cover here for the front button panel. Ribbon cable is underneath that. This comes off by itself, and it has one long screw. That is the only one like that. So I just leave that in that bracket that you take off and put it to the side like that, so you don't forget where that goes either. Alright, ribbon cable, you press down on the metal part as I'm doing and pull out with that black tab, and that disconnects the front panel USBs and things like that, and the button. Alright, so just get all your screws, put them aside. They are all the same except for that one long one I showed you. And then you should be ready, if you have all of them out, to pry this top shield off. Find a good gap. Up front here is a good place. You're going between top heat shield and the motherboard. I used a plastic one just so you don't scratch anything up. And now I'm going to show you where you know the bolts are not going to go. There's a little cross kind of bullseye X in these holes. Those holes are the through holes for the case bolts. You will not put those short screws you just took out into those holes, in case you're wondering where they go when you put them back. All right, there are two more short T9s holding the bolt in place, or I'm sorry, holding the motherboard in place. They're denoted by those two little arrows. And as you can see, those are the only two, and then you have the heat, or the CPU all-in-one unit retainer as well. You know, lift that off. That's also T9. What I'm showing you there are pads. They are a almost Play-Doh consistency. They're thermal pads. So be careful not to rub them off or damage them in any way. They will deform if you mess with them. Just kind of leave them alone as much as you can. They're just there for cooling. Alright, you pull it off of there. Probably the motherboard. You can see those two little pins are going into the power supply. And that's how you know where it's supposed to go back in. And I'm also showing you how that layer has the thermal pads as well. Alright, so now we've got the motherboard out. We can now start working on our HDMI. So I'll show you where that is. It's at the bottom of the back of the board, right there. It does not feel loose. Some of them will be visibly loose, and some of them will just look okay, and the pins will be loose. There's a little sticker thing, spacer you got to take off because we're going to be using heat and soldering. So let's switch over to our microscope camera, and now we're looking at the back of that HDMI under microfication, and we are going to go through and push on each little pin, and you can see they're moving. When they move, that means they're not soldered, and that's why this one is not working. So we know we have to replace it. Not all of them were moving, so what I do is I get some flux and I flux all the connectors as well as the pins on the HDMI itself, and then I come in with some leaded solder. The factory uses lead free, which has a higher melting point, and we're just trying to get this old HDMI off of here. So we're mixing the the new leaded with the old unleaded to make the old solder melt at a lower melting point. I did the same with the pins on the top. Here's the back of it, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with that. I've got my heat gun out now because we're actually going to be removing this HDMI. So you get heat. I've got it at about 421 or so Celsius, and you can see there I'm adding a little bit of leaded flux to the back of these, to the back of this, or the underside of the HDMI legs, because they are what hold this thing in mostly, but the pins do as well. So we want everything to come off, melt evenly, and come out nice and smooth. So when it starts to pop down, don't just yank it off, because sometimes you can pull these pads here with it. It'll have the pads, little copper pads, and if you pull on them without it being all the way melted, it will pull those pads up, and then it's a pain. You don't want to do it. So just be careful. Let it basically fall out under its own weight. All right, what I'm doing here is also I'm going through the pads. I'm adding the leaded solder. Some people go through, also flux as well. You want that when you're working with these pads so you don't pull pads up. Some people go through and remove all of it. I found that's not, you don't really need to do that. So just a lot of flux and add some of the leaded solder, and then go through and make sure the pads are not bridging across to each other. Make sure you get a good amount on there, and not too much. So as you can see, I actually had to go in with a braid because that's a de-wicking braid, so or I'm sorry, a desoldering braid. So it is actually going to be it picks up solder. It's actually sucking that solder onto the braid, because I had too much and two of the pads were bridging each other, and it wasn't gonna work like that. You want them to be independent of each other and not bridged. All right, so this is a step that I really like. I haven't always done it, but I've started doing it, and it's got a lot better results with these, a lot easier. Made these jobs a lot easier. So you go through and you actually add solder and a little bit flux and a little bit of solder, and you tin the back underneath the pins on the new HDMI port. So it actually basically has a layer of solder on it already, and it makes it stick to the pads that I'm heating up right now even better. And you don't have to do as much. It usually makes it so you don't have to go in afterwards and solder the legs by themselves. You can see how that's changing color, how that got real clear. That's how you know the solder's melted, and you can put your new port in. And I just stick it in and then hold it there a little bit, kind of wiggle it around. And here's our new port soldered in. Now I'm going through and making sure all the pins are soldered securely, and there are a couple that are not. So I just go in and start at the bottom and just go up and solder each one. Now if there was too much solder on any of these pins or on the pads, we would start bridging. So don't add solder when you're doing this. Have just the tip, because there's solder already there. Alright, so we went through and touched each pin, made sure it crept up and made the connection, and then we're actually going to go through one more time, the real fine pair of tweezers, touch each pin, make sure it doesn't move. If it doesn't move, that means it's soldered in solid, and those all are. Alright, so now back to assembly. The job is the HDMI port is installed, and now we just got to throw it all back together. So again, watch out for that connector right there, and you got to push down right where that power prongs were on the other side. Now you know your board is exactly where it needs to be, and you can start to assemble everything again. Alright, now remember, you got the little spacer adhesive, you've got your spacer for your processor, and then you've got your retainer for the processor, and that's on the other side of that was the liquid metal. This holds everything sandwiched in place. You can see it's kind of a curved design. It keeps constant pressure on it, and makes sure everything stays in place, and that liquid metal doesn't get out and go around on the board. Alright, easy to plug that thing back in. It just slides back in, and then you go ahead and you put your two motherboard screws, that one right there with the little arrow, and the one up top by that white wire, there's another little arrow. It's more of a triangle than an arrow, but you get the gist. I can get those guys screwed in. Now you can put your top plate back on. Alright, so now you are ready to start putting in all of those many screws. And you are on the home stretch. If you're going to do this more than once or twice, like I said, oh, there we go. There's that long screw for your ribbon cable bracket. So yeah, go ahead and do that. Line that up. Make sure your long screw goes where it's supposed to. And the rest of the screws just go back into the holes they came out of. You will see witness marks where they have been screwed in. There's kind of like a little scratch from them being screwed in. And as long as they do not have a X or like a bullseye type pattern on them, you know those are the right ones. You will also know if you put one in the wrong place when you try and put your top case back on and one of your screws will not screw in because you have put a screw in the wrong place here. So that will help you troubleshoot that if that does happen to you. A lot of screws. Luckily they are all the same length and the same screwdriver bit, which again is a T9 or Torx 9. We're also going to need to go ahead and make sure we get our antennas hooked up properly. There's a little channel they run down. You kind of tuck them behind. They have them kind of wrapping around themselves and going back. To be real honest, as long as they don't go over any open hole or are anywhere near the fan, you can put those wherever you want. If it doesn't go exactly back where Sony originally had it, it will not affect anything. You can see I didn't use the sticker, the little white sticker, to hold it in place. It just doesn't super matter. All right, so now we've got the top case. We have all of our screws in their homes. So now we just kind of have to look. I'm actually looking as I put this thing down that the screws go into the holes they're supposed to. There's the one under that void sticker right in the middle there that was giving me problems. If you want to pop that up and through like I'm about to do, yeah, right there, that's the void sticker. So that's the warranty sticker that you're not supposed to break if it's in warranty. But there's a screw under there. So everything goes down, and if everything starts screwing in, that means you've done it correctly. Just go around, hit them all. Most of them go into plastic, so don't go too crazy with them with the tightness. Go ahead and put your fan back down. Again, screws rather, are all in place. Don't forget to plug your fan back in. Get them all back to where they go. And put your shield for your M.2 Phillips screwdriver, and you have put all the bolts back on. Now just your little sticker to cover that connector up. Put the bottom plate on. It kind of angles in and on. Basically the same, the reverse of what you did getting it off. Put it in the front first and angle it in. Gotta kind of bang on it a little bit. Different than the other style. Oh, pop that in place, and you have done an excellent job of fixing your PlayStation 5 HDMI. Good job. Thank you so much for checking out my video. Please like, subscribe, and comment. And again, thank you for watching. I love you all.